Welcome back to the daily Rambam class. We are going through the laws of forbidden relations, and we are in chapter 14. Forbidden relations, as in people that can't marry other people. And that obviously brings us to a big topic, which is um, uh, obviously intermarriage and avoiding it, and who's considered a Jew and a not Jew, and who can marry who. Obviously, a big one. Before we go into the details, let's see where we are up to in the Rambam. It's Thursday after all. We are in the fifth book of the Rambam, Sefer Kedusha, the book of holiness. And in this book, there are only three subjects: forbidden relations, which covers 22 chapters; forbidden foods, which cover 17 chapters; and the laws of Shchita, which covers no less than 14 chapters. And so it is through watching how our relationships and watching what we eat, that it is in these two areas that we have become a holy people, a people that is distinct. And in this way, we are not similar to the other nations of the world, and we don't mingle because we have these distinct responsibilities and diets. Let's take a look at chapter number 14. We start with discussing a very interesting topic, which is the process of conversion continued. Yesterday, we gave a historical context. And today we see exactly what the procedure is. Halacha 1. What is the procedure when accepting a righteous convert? When one of the Gentiles comes to convert, we inspect his background. If an ulterior motive for conversion is not found, I guess when it means background, it means like, what's the context? Why is he coming? And if there isn't an ulterior motive, then we ask him, why did you choose to convert? Don't you know that in the present era the Jews are afflicted, crushed, subjugated, strained, and suffering comes upon them? It doesn't seem to be in your interest. If he answers, I know, would it be that I'd be able to be part of them? Meaning, I understand the hardships, but I have a calling and I want to be a Jew. We accept him immediately. We inform him of the fundamentals of the faith, meaning the unity of Hashem, the prohibition against the worship of false deities, which excludes the belief in Christianity. When I say excludes, I mean which prohibits the belief in Christianity, which believes in another power other than God, somewhat of another power. We elaborate on this matter, so that's very important we put a big focus on the fundamental beliefs, and then we also inform him about some of the easy mitzvahs and some of the more severe ones. And on this, we don't elaborate so much, meaning if a person wants to convert, more important than him being well-versed in every particular mitzvah is having him well committed to the fundamental mitzvahs. We inform of the transgressions of not leaving leket, shikha, and peah, which is crops that would be left for the poor, and the second tithe. And we inform him of the punishment given for violating the mitzvahs. Meaning, what is implied? Ketzad. We tell him, before you came to our faith, if you partook of fat, so even if an animal is shechted and it's made kosher, there's still certain sections of the animal that we are not allowed to eat. Those areas are called chaylev, fat, certain fats of the animal which are prohibited. So we tell them that as long as you don't become a Jew, if you eat fat, then no problem. You wouldn't be chayav kares for your soul to be cut off. If you desecrated the Shabbos, you were not liable to be stoned to death. Obviously, this means in the context of Beis Din and warning at all. Now, after you convert, if you partake of fat, you are liable for kares, for your soul to be cut off. If you desecrate the Shabbos, you are liable to be stoned to death, although this isn't done in practice today, but it tells us of the seriousness of the transgression. So why would you do it to yourself? We do not teach him all the particulars, lest this cause him concern and turn him away from a good path to a bad path. Meaning, we don't want to turn him away because of the nitty-gritty. We don't want to turn him away because we're saying there's so many details you need to remember, and he says it's too much for me. Rather, we dissuade him by saying, like on a fundamental level, do you realize that you will now be responsible for things that you'll be guilty for things, guilty for your life for things that until now were perfectly fine. For at the outset, we draw a person forth with soft and appealing words, as Hosea states, with cords of man I drew them forth, and then Hosea continues with bonds of love. So we do want to still be pleasant with him. Okay, continuing about punishments, just as he is informed of the punishments for disobeying the commandments, so too he is informed about the reward for their observance. We tell him that by observing these mitzvahs, he will merit the life of the world to come. For there is no completely righteous man other than a master of wisdom who observes these mitzvahs and knows them. When I was preparing, I understood this differently. I'm going to just see the Hebrew. Not sure exactly what the Rambam is meaning by those words. We tell him, no, that the world to come is hidden away only for the righteous. They are, meaning the Jews, meaning world to come is something that's special for the Jewish people. The fact that you see Israel suffering, difficulty in the world, reflects the good that is hidden away for them. Meaning, why would suffering be good? So he says, for they cannot receive an abundance of good in this world as the non-Jews do. Why not? Very fascinating, the Rambam. The Rambam says that if we get too much good in this world, we can become spoiled, in the literal sense of the word. For their hearts may become uplifted and they will err and lose the reward of the world to come. As Devarim says, Yeshurim became fat and rebelled, referring to the Jewish people. So the Rambam is actually saying that the reason that Hashem makes things difficult for us in this world is because if things are too good, then we actually go away from our faith and then we lose the world to come. By having things difficult, then somehow we don't get caught up in ourselves because ourselves are not all that too glorious. We focus more on Hashem and then we're able to merit the world to come. This is theological stuff. Interesting. The Rambam includes this all in the process of what we should tell a convert when he's converting. I guess we want to give him a deeper understanding of what Judaism is all about. So it's obviously much more than just do this mitzvah or do that mitzvah. And he continues, the Holy One, blessed be he, does not bring upon them an abundance of retribution, solely that they will not perish. On the other hand, Hashem is not going to punish us to the point that we perish. He cares about us. For all the other nations will perish, and they will prevail, as we've seen through the course of time, how all other nations have come and gone, but the Jewish people remain. We elaborate on this concept to make them feel cherished. If the prospective convert retracts and does not want to accept the mitzvahs, he goes on his way. If he accepts their observance, we do not have him wait, but instead circumcise him immediately. If he was circumcised, we draw the blood of circumcision from him, meaning he needs to still have what's called a kafar stam. A little bit of blood needs to come from the area. We wait until he heals entirely, until he's ready for the next step, which is mikvah. So once it's decided that he's ready for conversion, then we don't want to postpone the performance of a mitzvah. So far the curriculum we've discussed, and circumcision comes as soon as the person says he's ready, he agrees. Now, this is from the Rambam's sharing from a halachic perspective what it needs to entail. So obviously, halacha follows not only the Rambam, but the Shulchan Aruch that follows, which takes other authorities into consideration. And also there's a practical perspective. So a Beis Din today obviously has experience of dealing with many, many people and seeing what, and they've learned on a practical level what has needed to be put in place to ensure that it's done right. Okay, now for the mikvah process. 3 judges stand over him and inform him about some of the easy mitzvahs and some of the more severe ones a second time while he stands in the mikvah. If the convert was a female, then woman would get her ready, position her in the water, meaning a woman would take her to mikvah until she's completely covered until her neck. And then once she's completely covered other than her face, she's completely submerged in the water, then the judges inform her, just as him, of easy mitzvahs and the more difficult mitzvahs again, and then she immerses herself in their presence. So it's a bit of an art, but the Beis Din needs to see the immersion, but they certainly should not see anything inappropriate. So that's why there's a woman that sets it up in a way that the Beis Din can come in just to see the top of her head going underwater. So that because you actually need a Beis Din to witness this important step of conversion. Afterwards, they turn their faces away and depart so that they will not see her when she ascends from the water. So that is the process of mikvah. That pretty much brings us to the end of the process of conversion in the Rambam. We spoke a lot more about it yesterday. So that is, as far as conversion is concerned. Now let's talk about righteous Gentiles and avodim, or servants. What is meant by a ger toshav, a resident alien? The Torah speaks about a ger toshav. A ger toshav is a Gentile who makes a commitment not to worship false deities and to observe the other 6 universal laws commanded to Noah's descendants, the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide laws. He does not circumcise himself or immerse. We accept this commitment, and he is considered one of the pious Gentiles. So as we know, Judaism does not believe that non-Jews need to convert to Judaism in order to be a good person. Rather, if a Gentile just resolves to keep the 7 Noahide laws, then he is accepted, and he is considered pious. He's considered righteous. Why is he called a resident? Because we are permitted to allow him to dwell among us in Eretz Yisrael, as explained in Hilchos Avodah Zarah. So Israel, special land for the Jewish people, but anybody that's willing to accept the 7 Noahide laws is welcome to live within our country, as they're good people, they're righteous Gentiles. Interestingly, from a halachic perspective, we accept resident aliens, ger toshavs, only during the era when the Jubilee year is observed. So to actually have the halachic process where the Beis Din rules that a person is a ger toshav would only be done in the time of Yovel. In the present era, even if a Gentile makes a commitment to observe the entire Torah, with the exception of one minor point, quite a powerful point, he is not accepted. So if a person says, I'm going to convert to Judaism, I'm going to do 612 mitzvahs. There's just one mitzvah, however, that's a mitzvah that I can't get hold of. I can't let go of. So if a person accepts even 612 mitzvahs, but not one, then he cannot become a convert. Okay, so now we've spoken about ger toshav. What about somebody becoming a servant to a Jewish person? So, in order for a person, and as we learned when we learn, as we will learn when we learn the laws of servants, or slaves, that certainly the responsibilities that the Torah places on the master of a servant or slave is one that actually would care for the slave or servant's well-being in a non-racist way. But in order for a non-Jew to become a servant or a slave of a Jewish family, of a Jewish person, this is not practiced today, but at least in temple times, he would need to accept upon himself to follow the mitzvahs. So if he's becoming part of our household, then we do need him to, when I say part of our household, I don't just mean, a butler that comes and leaves, but somebody that literally, a servant literally becomes like a part of the family. So such a person would pretty much undergo somewhat of a conversion. They would have to accept upon themselves to do most of the mitzvahs. unless the contract said otherwise. Let's see this inside. When a servant is purchased from the Gentiles, we do not say to him, why did you choose to convert? Because he didn't choose, he was sold. Instead, we say to him, do you desire to enter into the category of Jewish servants and become one of the observant of them? If he agrees, he is informed about the fundamentals of the faith, about, again, some of the easy mitzvahs, some of the more severe ones, and the punishments and rewards associated with them, as we notify a convert. Then we immerse him. So actually, in order to become a servant, he would even need to go to mikveh, as would a convert, and we inform him of the mitzvahs while he's in the water. If he does not desire to accept the status of a servant, we are patient with him for 12 months. If by 12 months he's still not interested, then you cannot keep him. You would need to, you bought him as a servant, and you would need to just sell him back to a non-Jew. It is forbidden to maintain him for a longer period. But if at the outset he established a condition that he would not be circumcised or immersed, but instead would be a resident alien, meaning he'd be like a ger toshav, then you would be allowed to keep him as that. So if he says, I'll be your servant, but I'm not going to take all 613 mitzvahs upon myself, I'm just going to keep the 7. So then that also works. A servant may be maintained in this status only during the era when the Jubilee is observed, because as we said, we don't halachically classify a person as a ger toshav nowadays. Okay, so here's quite a extreme one. This is obviously saying from a Torah perspective. From a Torah perspective, the only sexual relations forbidden to a non-Jew are his mother, his father's wife, his mother's daughter, his maternal sister, a married woman, right, adultery, a male, and an animal, as will be explained. Other relations forbidden to the Jews are permitted to them. So from a Torah perspective, the prohibition against non-Jews against the prohibition of forbidden relations is only limited to a man, an animal, a married woman, or the person's maternal sister, mother, father's wife, and that's it. When a Gentile converts or a servant is freed, he is like a newborn baby. So a convert's Jewish birthday is actually the day they converted. But there's actually halachic relevance for this. Any relatives whom he had as a non-Jew or as a servant are no longer considered his relatives. He's begun a new life. Now, when it says are no longer his relatives, it doesn't mean that he shouldn't respect them. He certainly should respect them. A convert certainly should respect his parents. But it means as far as the Torah's prohibition of incest. If both he and they convert, he is not obligated for relations with any of them. Which obviously sounds pretty crazy. We'll see, however, that the rabbis didn't allow it. Let's spell this out. According to scriptural law, a convert may marry his mother or his sister after they convert. Nevertheless, our sages forbade this so that the converts will not say, we came from a more severe level of holiness to a less severe one. So what does it mean that he could marry his mother? Because as long as he was, before he converted, a non-Jew is not allowed to marry one's mother. But once he converts, then halachically, his biological mother is not considered his mother. So it's considered like another person. And so therefore, from a halachic perspective, it wouldn't be a violation. But the rabbis forbade it, so halachically it is forbidden, because otherwise it's going to seem like by the process of conversion, somebody that previously was forbidden to him suddenly becomes forbidden, which wouldn't make sense, because when we go to an outer level of holiness, it requires more carefulness, more laws in place, not less responsibilities. Yesterday, this relationship was forbidden, and today it is permitted, he would have said. Similarly, when a convert engages in relations with his mother or his sister when they have not converted, It's considered as if he had relations with a woman with whom he was not related. So as far as punishment is concerned, it wouldn't be considered incest, but certainly it would be morally a terrible, and not just morally, it would be a terrible thing. What is the law that applies to converts with regards to relations with their relatives? As we explained, if one married while a Gentile to his mother or his sister and they converted, then we separate them, as explained. Meaning, if the man was married to his sister when he was a non-Jew, which was forbidden, and then he converted, so he would need to separate. And they converted, they would need to separate. If he was married to any one of the other forbidden relations, and he and his wife converted, then they are not forced to separate. So let's say he was married to his paternal sister, his father's sister. You know, this sounds terrible, right? How could a man ever marry his paternal sister? It is terrible, but I'll tell you an interesting scenario. I'm not sure if you've heard this before. Nowadays, with fertility treatment and sperm donors, you could have a man that meets a woman he's never seen in his life, and halachically, this woman is his paternal sister, because they were both born from the seed of the same man. So that's why everything in halach is super is that's not why, it's the wisdom of Hashem. That even with their halachas, it seems so strange and ridiculous, there could be super modern applications which are super relevant and necessary. So if a couple, non-Jewish couple, decided to convert, and it turns out that they were actually paternal siblings, then they would be allowed to remain married, because once they convert, then then whatever relatives they had prior to the conversion are not considered halachically as relatives, except for, as we said, a mother or a sister. This applies even when he certainly knows that these persons are his paternal relatives. For example, twins, in which instance it is clear that the father of one is the father of the other. Nevertheless, our sages did not enforce a decree with regard to one's paternal relatives. If a guy was already married to his paternal sister, then converted, then they would be allowed to stay married. Accordingly, a convert may marry the wife of his paternal brother, the wife of his father's brother, anything on the father's side, his father's wife, and his son's wife. This applies even if, meaning from the father's side. No, his son's wife. Meaning his son that he had before he was Jewish, once he converts, then if it's his son's wife would be allowed to him if they were already married. This applies even if they married his brother, his father, his father's brother, or his son after they converted. Similarly, his mother's paternal sister, his paternal sister, and his daughter who converted are permitted to him. He may not, however, marry his maternal sister, his mother's maternal sister, nor a woman who married his maternal brother after he converted. If, however, a woman married his brother while he was a Gentile, then she is permitted to him. Okay, quite a few details over there. I'm going to continue along, and you're welcome to look more into that halacha at your disclosure. Number 14. Where are we at? We are going through relations forbidden to a convert. When two twin brothers were not conceived in a state of holiness, but they were born in a state of holiness, meaning that the mother was pregnant and then she went through conversion. So they were conceived when she was not Jewish, but they were born once she was Jewish. Each are liable for relations with the other's wife because of the prohibition against relations with the brother's wife. So the Torah says that a man is not allowed to marry his brother's wife. Obviously, if they got divorced or if his brother died and they did have children. So you might say that since they were conceived before the conversion, then maybe it wouldn't halachically be considered like a brother, and therefore he would be allowed to marry his brother's wife once they got divorced or whatever scenario. We say no, since they were born after the mother went through conversion, they are considered halachic brothers, so he wouldn't be allowed to marry his a woman that was previously married to his brother. Okay, when a man marries a female convert and a daughter who converted, or two maternal sisters who converted, he should remain married to one of them and divorce the other. So a man was married to two sisters and then they converted. So since once they've converted, it's as if they're not his relatives, but still the rabbis don't allow it. So the rabbis say you could stay married to one and divorce the other. If he married a female convert and she died, he is permitted to marry her mother or her daughter. Since after all, they're not considered relatives, so that prohibition of the Torah is not extended. Our sages ordained the decree only during the woman's lifetime. It is permissible for a man to marry two paternal sisters who converted. Our sages did not ordain any decrees with regard to paternal relations, as explained. So again, if a man has a regular person that was born Jewish that didn't convert, so he wouldn't be allowed to marry his paternal sister. But if he converted, then he would be allowed to. The rabbis didn't extend their decree to them. Number 16. Shniyos. Shniyos are other prohibitions from the Torah, but shniyos are instituted by the sages to prevent a person from marrying somebody that's forbidden to him. Our sages did not ordain any decrees with regards to shniyos to convert. Therefore, a convert may marry his maternal grandmother. Similarly, a person may marry a convert and the mother of her maternal grandmother, or her and the daughter of her daughter's daughter. Similar laws apply with regards to the remainder of the shniyos. So I'm going to leave that for now. And now we come to the final three halachos, which relates to servants and freed servants. A servant is permitted to marry his mother while he is a servant. So this is a really strange phenomenon. And basically, when a person is in a servant state, he's not held responsible. He's not treated like a person. I mean, he's treated as a person as far as not being cruel to him and giving him what he needs, but in this sense, not, which is pretty crazy. But this is the halacha. So that means a servant would be allowed to marry his mother or his sister, his daughter. So why? He's not considered a non-Jew because he's considered the servant of a Jew. And we said when he becomes a servant of a Jew, it's a semi-conversion. So although non-Jews are forbidden to these people, he's not. And since he has not entered the category of the Jewish people, so the relations that are forbidden to the converts are not yet forbidden to him. So he's like between the lines. He's no longer bound by what's prohibited to non-Jews, and is not yet bound what's prohibited to Jews. And therefore, halachically, this prohibition would not apply to him at all. It appears to me that if a servant engages in homosexual or sodomite relations, they should be executed, for these two prohibitions are universally applicable. So although we're saying that just shows how strong the Torah's prohibition against relations between same sexes, or I should say more specifically relations between two men, is that a servant would be allowed to have relations with even his immediate family member, female members, but if he has relations with another man, then he is deserving of the death penalty, obviously, if he was warned and everything was in place. Or maybe not so, obviously. I'm not sure exactly how it works with the servants. Because that's universal. That applies to every human being. Finally, number 19, servants who are freed are like converts. All of the relationships forbidden to converts are forbidden to them. Whoever is permitted to a convert are permitted to them. So once a servant is free, he becomes a convert. As I once mentioned a few months back, there was a particular sage that had 9 people for the minyan, and he really wanted to daven with the minyan. So he actually freed his servants. And at that point, his servant became a full-fledged Jew, and that way they had 10 people for the minyan. A person may give his maidservants to his own servants or to a servant belonging to his colleague. Even at the outset, he may give one maidservant to 2 servants, which would usually be like completely adulterous. But servants and maidservants, in this regard, there's no restrictions. Nor must they follow any restrictions. Instead, they are in this regard, I would add, but obviously, Instead, they are like animals as far as the prohibitions of relations. Although the Rambam said in the halacha before that no exception is made when it comes to sodomite or behavior or male to male. There's no difference whether a maidservant is set aside for a servant or not, for there is no concept of marriage except within the Jewish people or amongst the non-Jews themselves, as opposed to a servant, but not among servants themselves or between servants and the Jewish people. Thank you so much for joining. Wishing you a wonderful Shabbos.